Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, a laid-back, data-back conversation where we talk all things cannabis, from U.S. MSOs to Canadian LPs, products and market analysis through the lens of data. My name is Cy Scott with Headset. I am joined, as always, by Emily Paxia of Poseidon.
Hey everyone, welcome to the High Rise.
And today we have a very special guest with Brett Heyman, founder and creative director of Edie Parker. Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so we thought we could kick it off with some of your background about, where you come from, what you've been working on prior to cannabis, and what brought you into cannabis.
Sure. Well, I come from New York, although by way of California. I grew up in California and I've been in New York since 2002. And I had a fashion background. I worked at Gucci from 2002 to about 2010 with a year-and-a-half stint at Dolce & Gabbana. And then I had my first child, whose name is Edie. There's a lot of confusion about who my brand is named after. When people meet me, they're like, "You're not Edie." So I launched a line of acrylic clutches in 2010 called Edie Parker. Because I had a fashion background, sort of quickly became a red carpet staple and got a lot of market share in this very specific category and expanded into home in 2016. And as I continued to think about expansion, I didn't want to go where there were these saturated markets. So I didn't feel like the world needed more shoes or more ready to wear, but we did think that the world needed more cannabis, and specifically branded cannabis and cannabis for women. So we started thinking about cannabis as an extension of our home collection, really cannabis accessories that sort of surprised and delighted the way that our heritage accessories did. And that's what launched us that's what led us to launch Flower by Edie Parker in the spring of 2019.
Yeah, I actually have one of those clutches thanks to my dear friend Rosie Matteo, who gifted it to me, and I always get a compliment when I carry it around. So it's very cool, very unique look for sure. All right, so just thinking more about when you were saying what kind of brought you into cannabis, when you launched into the industry, what were some of the goals you had in terms of where you wanted to see this heading? What kind of, trail you're blazing in terms of launching this product? As a female in cannabis, it's not an area that had been addressed that well, frankly, historically speaking. So I'm curious to hear more about that.
Really, we came into it through accessories. We started thinking about accessories in the way that I thought about barware. Edie Parker's always been really vintage inspired. It's based on these acrylic clutches from the 50s and 60s. The home collection was based on a lot of vintage accessories from this time in post-war America where we're setting fashion trends globally and there's all this innovation. So I started thinking about cannabis accessories like bar accessories in the sense that I didn't feel there was anything on the market that felt really feminine or really considered and kind of playful, something that you'd want to display or want to gift. I felt that things were either really masculine or they felt like you bought them at a head shop, by NYU, or they felt medicinal or something you'd hide away. So that's how we started to think about it, that there was all this opportunity in cannabis accessories. And through our research, we just started visiting dispensaries. We wanted to see what people were buying in dispensaries, what dispensaries look like. I hadn't really been in dispensaries ever. It wasn't in California when legalization really took off. So I started going to California, or just on my California trips, visiting dispensaries more. And we realized that at a brand level, there was the same problem, that I felt like the brands were intimidating. They weren't friendly. They didn't jump off a shelf. They, again, felt medicinal or extremely masculine. And so we started thinking, is there any way that we could really have a companion line of flower to go with these accessories that we're making that would speak to women? I think a lot of women at the time that I knew were vaping. It was like Bebo was all the rage, and those sort of elusive Chardonnay moms were trying Bebo pens. And so we thought, well, let's we know a lot of girls who just like to get high and smoke weed. And so let's see what we can offer her.
I think that's spot on. It is funny how it went down that road, and I feel like in the early days when I got in, it was, we'll just make it pink, and then it's for girls. I feel like there's a lot more nuance to being a female consumer than that. In my past life, I used to do consulting and tried to help brands like American Express understand female consumers, and it was just really interesting to see how you get kind of these broad strokes painted over what it means to be a girl and what you're attracted to, and also the fact that women do actually really like cannabis. I think that women have been alienated from cannabis in many ways, and I think it has a lot to do with, you know, just the culture around it in some aspects. And like when you go to trade shows, there's like the booth babes and sometimes that doesn't feel as inviting. But actually, we stopped by the Edie Parker booth at Hall of Flowers, and we had a really fun visit there. It was a really pretty experience in Palm Springs, so that was cool.
Yeah, really, it definitely stands out amongst the crowd. I think it's such a unique play in the space. If you had a chance to go to Hall of Flowers, but there's like a lot of booths, a lot of different brands, and I think, being so fashion forward, it just really, I don't know, it's very noticeable as we pass by.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is I don't think our industry speaks enough about, consumer segmentation and really kind of dialing in who the consumer is, what their cross sections of likes and dislikes are, like what other brands live in their life. I was curious as you were launching this, kind of who is your target consumer? And I'm super curious to hear Sai's additional layering in of data around the female consumer in cannabis. So
I'll be very honest, we didn't come into this with a whole lot of data points. We sort of, like everything we do, we're thinking, how can we fill a hole that we find? If, we see this in our lives, so we want to solve this for ourselves because we feel like, anecdotally from our friends and relatives and peers, this is something that we're all feeling. So we didn't go in targeting women of a certain demographic, an age, a socioeconomic position. We just wanted to talk to women. And I think what we had was, at that point, 9 years of data for our heritage brand, which always surprised us. People would say, who do you speak to? Who do you sell to? And we would always say, it's really because we do accessories and we try to have this positive lifestyle, and everything that we do always sort of had a wink. It wasn't that serious, that we really did have women across generations, across spectrums, people buying accessories for their mothers and their daughters. And I think we've been really surprised. We don't have data from the dispensaries as readily, but just from our own brick and mortar on our own website, we have been surprised that a lot of people are buying cannabis accessories for their adult children, just buying behavior that we were not expecting. And I think similarly, when we go to dispensaries, when we pop up in Boston or we go to Chicago, we're really surprised by the amount of men that are actually buying our product, or at least stopping to talk to us. We didn't think that men would be interested in us at all, but unless, they were buying for a sister or a girlfriend, whatever, we really do find that a lot of men have been trying our stuff and telling us that they like our pre-rolls, and we've been pretty pleased about it.
I've noticed a lot of men, I think it is because it's got that wink and it is playful and it is not, gender direct. It's so not on the nose. So I have the pipe that's the flower pipe, and I get so many compliments from men on it that they're like, I love that. It's so beautiful. And I feel like when something's beautiful, who's not the target consumer for that? So
on the data side, we know it's kind of held for some time that the female consumer is about a third of the audience and 2/3 to male. Although we have noticed more recently in markets like Canada, it's a little higher. It's about 38% of consumers are women. So it's an interesting thing. And I think that the nuanced difference between the US and Canada is that in Canada, it is federally legal. And in the US, it's state by state. And so maybe there's something there where because it doesn't have this federal overhang, that it's a little more normalized. And so maybe you're seeing more women consumers coming into the category. And with your brands and how you position it, do you feel like you can help drive that kind of normalization of cannabis for that audience? Because I think for a lot of new consumers, it's still kind of an intimidating category to go into. I know plenty of people that have said they haven't gone into a store because they don't know what to do, or they don't want to look silly or be embarrassed by asking, what they think might be dumb questions. But when you have brands like Edie Parker get involved, do you think that can help push those numbers up here in the US and even in Canada, should you guys get there?
Totally. I mean, that's, a lot of what we talk about is that, first of all, cannabis is intimidating. I mean, I think just the nature of, as you said, it not being federally legal, it's intimidating and something that's been illicit for so long. So I think obviously more and more legal options will help with that. But I think also just not having a lot of females in leadership positions or having brands. I mean, I think certainly we're a team of all women. We're 10 women. And I think, I don't smoke cannabis, for me, at least, I'll speak for myself. I like cannabis for things like sex, right? I mean, I think that's one of my favorite uses in cannabis. And I think that is not a conversation that we have at all. I think, from a CEO point of view, I think from a bud tender point of view, that's, when I hear about women are coming to cannabis, people always talk about like period cramps or things that feel very therapeutic and medicinal. And I think that sounds great, but not that fun. So I think there's just conversations that aren't happening because there's not enough females in the space, or there historically haven't been enough females in the space. And obviously we want to be part of that conversation and part of that change.
Yeah, you just hit on an intersection again that I'm really interested in, which is, empowering women to be able to talk about sex more and the role that cannabis can play in it, which is much more productive than alcohol. So it's like, it's a game changer for many people I know, but it's kind of like a hushed in the in the halls conversation that we can't get into directly, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
I talk about it constantly. I mean, I imbibe, so don't get me wrong. I love a martini, but alcohol is literally desensitizes you, and it's just not good for sex unless you just want to be passed out, which whatever. But the cannabis just makes everything feel better and taste better. Like it just is so much better for sex, and I feel like women don't even think of that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, everyone knows on the pod that I'm a fan of tequilas, but same thing. It's like you're just kind of like all over the place with that, as opposed to kind of more in the moment with cannabis, which I think is really important when you're trying to connect. So I think that's a great point. Did you have any other data?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, there are a lot of different categories of cannabis. You mentioned, pre-rolls and flower. And topicals, I think, kind of fit into some of that as well. But we've noticed like the male-female kind of split. You're seeing a lot more female consumers in the topical category, in tinctures, sublinguals, even edibles. Edibles, about 40% of sales go to female audience. And you compare that to flower, which is about 30% of sales. So definitely, over-indexed on that side. And I think it's, a variety of categories for wellness, for other things, it's kind of, it can be used in so many ways, right? And like helping people understand that is important. And I think that's reflected in the numbers, that it's not just this, necessarily like recreational thing that, you're using just to get high. I mean, when you see the numbers with topicals, with tinctures, it kind of paints a different picture. So are you guys looking at getting into more categories to have kind of representation across all the categories out there?
We are not looking to do all the categories, but I think certainly we think there's a lot of opportunity for the women that we're already talking to. Like, I think I'd really love to get into sort of microdose edibles. I love those personally. And I think that makes a lot of sense for us. We had a false start with a vape pen, a disposable in California. And so we took a break. We really thought about that, what that should be, what that should look like, and redesigned something great. So I think we're just waiting to press go on that. But yeah, I mean, we made our own CBD topical. We made a sleepover spray, which was a sex spray, which I was obsessed with, but because of various payment processor issues, it just doesn't really get the traction that it deserves. But I feel like, again, not to like talk about sex and cannabis constantly, but I feel like certainly for topicals and like, I don't know if 1906 still makes their aphrodisiac chocolates, but I feel like I want that all day long.
Me too. This is going to be the hottest pod we do. I think we're going to get a lot of listeners.
Sound ridiculous. I'm going to hear myself.
Trust me, I'm here for it. It's a constant conversation we're having. So, and I think that 1906 did a good job of being pretty playful with it, and yet very inviting. And you early on brought up the point of gifting, and I feel like I know a lot of people were gifting those when they came out, because it was like, again, a wink. Here you go. Here's your aphrodisiac chocolates.
How many times can you go to someone's house and bring a bottle of wine? Nobody cares. Those only serve to be regifted in my mind. So I feel like if you bring certainly aphrodisiac chocolates, but any kind of cannabis, any kind of edible, even just like here, for the same amount of money as a bottle of wine, here's a beautiful flower pipe. I just think it's such a better alternative, and it's exciting, and it brings a party.
It does bring a party, and it definitely generates a conversation. And I feel that with my female friends who've been kind of alienated from consuming cannabis, to Sai's point about some of those different product categories, they've been like tiptoeing in with, tinctures or topicals, and then the lower dose edibles, like the 2.5 milligram, which I think is a great way to start. I do try to be a person who introduces things to my female friendship groups, because I want them to understand what it means to have this as a part of your life, as opposed to just the alternative. There's always the medicinal aspects of cannabis, which we love and adore, and that's like the root of why I got into the space. But It's like I came for the medicinal cannabis. I'm staying for the fun of adult
Totally.
use. Yeah.
Totally.
And Tahira and Rosie and I always kind of joke that we're like, keep cannabis cool. Like, it's got to be playful. It's got to be fun because it is a lifestyle thing in the end.
I was wondering how you guys reach consumers. Like, one of the challenging things in their category is not being able to market effectively. So many people's Instagram gets shut down, and you can't advertise in traditional social media in the same way. So do you have some similar problems, or because it's an accessory line, or you have that accessory line, I should say, it gives you kind of an opportunity to market the brand and help people understand what the brand is, and then from there they can discover further products?
Totally. I think just having the accessories allows us to circumvent a lot of those regulations, which are so onerous and so unfair. But yeah, I think we get play in a lot of mainstream publications and a lot of media because we've been doing this a long time. And it also, because we have these accessories, we work with a lot of traditional retailers. So like we can be in the Urban Outfitters and get marketing through Urban Outfitters and their social, and then people can come and discover us. So it's a battle. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy because it's not, but I think we have avenues to be a little bit creative. And we also have been around a long time. I mean, I've been doing Edie Parker since 2010. And even with flower, like we didn't just come up to this. Like we've been really getting our hands dirty since 2019. We've bought and sold biomass. We've done extraction. We've done last mile delivery. Like we've been doing this a while now. So I feel like we are a little bit smarter about how to wave our hands.
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve, but once you're in it, you kind of know where to look.
Yeah, I think the having the accessories, having the brand, Edie Parker, outside of cannabis is so powerful to just building a brand inside cannabis. It reminds me of Seth Rogen's Houseplant brand, which you might be familiar with, and they do some accessories, some smoking accessories, and I think it's a great opportunity in the same way, right, to get that kind of coverage in publications and maybe shelf space at traditional retailers and so on. So yeah, it's a real advantage, right? Because I think it's one of the hardest things of building a brand is marketing your brand. And if you can't market it, I think that there's a lot of challenges for traditional cannabis brands. So having that kind of opportunity is huge.
Yeah. And I think moreover, as Emily said, cannabis is a lifestyle. So I think it's hard, especially for us, like right now, we're only in the market in certain markets with pre-rolls. So I think it's hard to convey a lifestyle with a single SKU, in a few varieties. So having a lifestyle to speak to, we've been building what we consider a lifestyle brand for 10 plus years. So I think Edie Parker means something. And if you can't get it from the dispensary shelf, you can look up our Instagram, you can look up our website, you can look up the press that we've done or what we stand for, and you can say, oh, I like what this brand stands for. I like this lifestyle that they speak to, what, X, Y, and Z factors. So I think it's more than just marketing. It really allows us to tell people who we are.
Yeah, and so to that end, you've done some partnerships in the industry. First of all, would you mind sharing with the listeners who you've partnered with and also how you select who you do want to work with in the industry in order to kind of uphold the tenets of your brand and what it stands for?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's really important that people know, like, we're very authentic as a brand about what we do, but we don't pretend to be cultivators. I'm not a plant expert. We know what we're good at and what we bring to the table and what we're not good at. So I think we want to work with partners who have really good access to flower, who have great retail locations, who have strong management teams, people who are really good at what they do, and we can be really good at what we do. So currently we're in a partnership with Ascend, and they white label flower for us in Illinois and Massachusetts. We've worked with Slang in Colorado, and we loved working with them. They were a great team. And then also because, as I spoke to our accessories, we also work with Cresco. We work with Curaleaf. We work with GTI because we sell our accessories in all of their doors, even if they don't carry our flower in states that they're in. So we've had just great opportunity to meet with all these management teams and are just so impressed and jazzed about the people that are coming to the space.
That's good to hear. And then when you think about the kind of the brandscape of the industry, what companies do you think are doing a good job in terms of building brands? What brands have you kind of garnered respect for, or have garnered respect from you as a fellow brand builder in the industry?
I mean, we touched on 1906. I love 1906. They speak to me really just like my aesthetic and the products that they make, I love. I think Wild does an amazing job. I think some sort of in-house MSO brands are great. Like I think Good is great. So funny sounding. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is that there's not a lot of national brands. There's not a lot of brands with a lot of attention or, outside of their sort of local spaces. So I think that's the challenge and the opportunity. And I think we're really trying to be one of those brands that resonates across the states that we're in.
I think we're in really early innings on brand building, even the ones that seem to be kind of like the winners. And even Wild, I mean, Wild really helped to completely put the gummy category on a rocket ship. But I always talk about this with people. The minute a brand does a great job, then there's a million people coming for that space trying to eat that lunch. And so I think that it's one of those things where building a brand is you're never done. It's a constant effort to continue to innovate.
Honestly, keeps me up at night. And I have to say, not to talk shit about our peers, but my social media person did say that she's like, I've never seen more copying in an industry than in this industry. I think it is just like so early and lawless that everybody's like, as soon as you see something that works, they're like, oh, we should all look like that now or do that. And I think obviously that's like, the brand space is going to look really different than it does now in a few years. But it is, it's hard to always be innovating.
It is. I know. As my friend Maggie used to say, everything became millennial pink at one point. It was just like everything.
Thank you, Glossier.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, of course.
It is very fragmented, I think, Wild West, this explosion of products and brands. And I think, because of that, there's a lot of noise out there. But I think having something like Edie Parker backing, what you're doing gives it a little more weight than maybe some others that come and go. And the branding might just be the packaging on the shelf, and that's kind of the extent of it, right? I think you guys can go a lot further, but certainly it is can be messy out there. And we try and track all these products and brands across all these markets, and it's overwhelming, the amount that come and go over time. So I had a question on just kind of moving into the category. Was it just a natural extension? Did it raise any eyebrows? Was the feedback like, oh, this is such an obvious thing? Like, why didn't I do this? Or was it kind of like a surprised reaction, that you're getting into the cannabis industry?
I don't think it was obvious at all. I think people were pretty shocked, I think in a good way. I think once people heard about it, they thought, oh, that's clever. That's fun. It's exciting. Look, I think at its best, right, fashion sort of holds a mirror up to what's happening in culture and sort of what's of the moment. And I think cannabis is obviously like what's happening in culture. And certainly like, when you talk about social justice reform and criminal justice reform, obviously we all know you can't talk about that without talking about cannabis legalization. So I think I make the argument that fashion and cannabis do make sense together. And I think there will be more and more overlap. I certainly think we had some people who had been buying our handbags that clutched their pearls a little bit and said, they were not down with it. But for the most part, I think people were excited. I think people who hadn't really been exposed to cannabis in a while were excited to kind of have it from a brand that they'd been buying from for all these years and kind of trusted. And I think, people just as we develop more and more products and SKUs, they get more and more excited.
Definitely. So pre-rolls today, and you did a little bit in the vapor category, and you're looking at going back into that. You mentioned maybe some low-dose edibles. Is it more of a priority to introduce new categories in the markets you're in, or are you guys looking to expand into other states beyond the kind of footprint you have today?
I think both. I mean, I think, in the states that we're in where it's working and it's resonating, we'd love to have more products for people that like our brand and that are buying our stuff. But it's difficult. I mean, obviously there's like supply constraint issues across the board, and it's hard to launch new form factors.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's hard to launch in new markets in general and then new form factors on top of that. I mean, nothing seems easy in the cannabis industry.
I mean, you said the Wild West, and before I got into it, I would hear that expression, and I thought it was pretty flip. And now being in it, it's like, I am so shocked by how difficult it is, how everything just feels like such a battle all the time.
Oh, yeah. You're preaching to the choir. It's, after 10 years in this thing, it's
tired.
Yeah.
That's what I say to Greg all the time, Emily. I'm like, I'm just so tired.
I'm so tired. That's why we have to do things like South by Southwest or this podcast, because we've got to keep meeting great people and hearing stories that continue to elevate the whole discussion and keep us going forward. So,
yeah, it's true. It does energize us a bit to yeah, we're all in this together. We're all like lifting this industry up in different ways. And so it's great to be able to do this and meet people like yourself that are also doing that, raising the profile of the industry by having mainstream media talk about your brand and kind of opening people's eyes to, okay, cannabis legalization isn't necessarily the end of the world, and it's not, the sky's not going to fall. Well, Brett, thanks so much for joining us today. It was really great to get that insight into Edie Parker and where, you know, the brand is headed and all the interesting things you guys are doing. So for the listeners, where can people find Edie Parker?
Well, thank you so much for having me. You can check us out on Instagram or the internet at Edie Parker Flower. And then if you want to try our pre-rolls, then come to any of the Ascend dispensaries in Illinois or Massachusetts. We're in a lot of Cresco doors in Illinois. We're honestly we're in a lot of doors in the state in Illinois. So check us out on our webpage and look for a dispensary near you and let us know what you think.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
We'll have to do that next time I'm in Illinois.
Yes, I have not made it to the Ascend store on Friend Street in Boston, so I've got to get there.
More reason to now.
Yeah.
Road trip when you're in New York. Me, you, and
right.
Rosie.
Yes. Rosie and I have done road trips, and so I think that would be really fun. We should do a tour. And New Jersey is opening.
Yeah. I'm great on a road trip if you love hearing people sing loudly.
Oh, okay. We're friends.
Sounds like it's happening.
Yeah. You do not have to ask me twice to get into a singing situation. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks again, Brett.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.